Welcome to RPG Reanimators, a podcast for GMs where we dissect horror scenarios and offer our experiences and advice to reanimate them on the table. I'm Alex.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Paul.
Lex and Holly are on unpaid sabbatical, at least until the angry mob calms down.
We'll miss you. Today, we're joined by Paul Fricker, Associate Editor at Chaosium. Paul is well known to us as a co-author on Call of Cthulhu 7th edition with Mike Mason, and writing the popular scenarios Full Fathom 5, Dockside Dogs, and My Little Sister Want You to Suffer. Thanks for joining us today, Paul.
You're very welcome. Pleased to be here.
Great. Well, with that out of the way, let's see who's in the waiting room. Today, we're consulting on writing Call of Cthulhu scenarios with Paul Fricker. We'll discuss lessons we've learned from our games and offer our best advice. We'll be trying to avoid spoilers for any of Paul's scenarios, but we may discuss the core concepts of them. Message from the future, we do hit on some spoilers for My Little Sister Wants You to Suffer, but we'll definitely flag it for you. Now, let's begin our consultation. So, Paul, I think what is very important first is to define what a Call of Cthulhu scenario is. So, what is a Call of Cthulhu scenario to you?
Okay, so I think there's 3 dials, really, that you can play with and turn up and down. Perhaps the first one is, well, what is the first one? Maybe it's investigation, because typically it's an investigative game. But you can be heavy on the investigation or you can be light on the investigation, and sometimes almost no investigation. Second dial will be horror. That's something you can really dial up or you can really dial down. And sometimes it's comedic horror, sometimes it's gritty horror, sometimes it's Scooby-Doo, sometimes, it's like, it's not. And the third one is adventure, because we're getting into, particularly in pulp, but not just in pulp, it's about, it's almost like Indiana Jones, it can go in that direction, or even in Sherlock Holmes, you can have chases, you can have combats, you can have various things, which are aspects of action scenes that you would see on the screen. But you can have none of that. But you need one of those, at least one of those 3 dials to be turned up. But you can, when you play with those dials, you get a very, very different style of game. But they're all Call of Cthulhu. And people play the game in different ways. And this is something I think as an author of a scenario, you need to appreciate how people play the game differently and how they'll take your scenario and play it differently as well. So it's good to be kind of mindful of that when you're writing, I think. What is a Call of Cthulhu scenario? Beyond that, it's like, what is a horror film? It's as open as that almost.
I see. So I can kind of tell, like, from these 3 dials of investigation, horror, and adventure, you're taking sources of conflict, potential conflict for your party of investigators to go against, right? And as a scenario writer, you're like weaving this in and throwing in these conflicts at the right time. I guess that's what pacing is. So yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah. Perhaps and there's nothing wrong with the standard, but if there's a standard, it's like something bad has happened or is going to happen, but probably has already begun to happen. There are some clues. Somebody comes to you requesting that you do something. Somebody's been killed, somebody's gone missing,
Right.
Something bad is going to happen. And you investigate a series of clues and you get to a culmination, to a climax of the story where perhaps you're facing down the bad guys. And that's a kind of a standard model. Now, that can be great. That can be fantastic. But I think it's important not to feel restrained or constrained that that's the only way to do it.
And, speaking of constraints, I actually noticed that you didn't mention Lovecraft at all. So a Call of Cthulhu scenario doesn't even need to have Lovecraftian works.
I don't think so.
That's great.
No, no, totally. I'm a big fan of Lovecraft's works, but equally, I take inspiration from all sorts of places. And like I said, with horror films, you look at any horror film, I think you can take that and if there's something in it you can turn into a game, then it doesn't have to be Lovecraftian. It can be vampires, it can be zombies, they're kind of like well-known tropes, but it can be anything. It could be The Thing, it could be Alien, it could be literally anything that
Mhm.
sort of lends itself to. I think it's got to be kind of there's got to be some horror tropes in there. Otherwise, it's not really Call of Cthulhu. Maybe I
Hmm.
don't think I'd want to run
Yeah.
like just a typical like dungeon bash with Call of Cthulhu. That would feel weird. Or just a straight science fiction game with no horror in it. That would be weird to do. So I think there's
Yeah.
got to be elements of horror, but beyond that, it's like there's no real constraints. Any of those things could be done with Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you put adventure as kind of the third aspect of the triangle there, because yeah, that's such a core part of if we think about like the big campaigns, is they're all kind of those Indiana Jones adventures across large areas, exploring, doing all that kind of work, but that's not necessarily I mean, Call of Cthulhu is typically when you describe it, it's investigative horror. The adventure isn't necessarily spelled out, but it's definitely there.
And if we do go back to Lovecraft, just to bounce
Hmm.
off what Alex said, it's like, well, if you do look at his stories, there is adventure. They're
Yeah.
going to the Antarctic.
The Dreamlands, it's portal fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even like the story, the Call of Cthulhu. They're going
Yeah.
down into Louisiana swamps, and there's adventure there, and there's adventure on the high seas. One ship against another. There's definite sort of sense of, it's kind of recounts of adventures, but
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
certainly an aspect of it.
Definitely. Even something as simple as the investigators, they go to a creepy house. The act of going there is adventure, is it not?
Totally. Yeah, I think so.
Right. So now that we've discussed like what your definition of Call of Cthulhu scenario is, I think we can start talking about stretching the limits, pushing it to the limit.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you do it?
I don't think it's necessarily an active thing to like try and stretch the limits.
Hmm.
I think it's
Mhm.
more of it's so when I'm writing, one of those scenarios that you mentioned, I'm not thinking, oh, I'm going to try and break the mold of what a Call of Cthulhu scenario is. I just don't think of a mold.
Right. So
So I
you're
don't,
still kind of living in harmony with it. You're not trying to actively break.
yeah, I'm not active. That my remit isn't to try and create something different to what one might call a standard, if there is such a thing. Well, I think there is such a thing, but I don't
Mm.
want to say a standard Call of Cthulhu scenario in a way of denigrating it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's not the case at all. So I don't set out to write something different. I just think my style lends itself to creating something a bit different. But I do hear, because when I hear people talk about what a Call of Cthulhu scenario is, sometimes I think, well, you're putting constraints on it that aren't there.
Mhm.
So, a case in point, talking with a friend, and he said, "I'm not a big fan of Call of Cthulhu. I don't really like the setting."
Hmm.
And I didn't really confront him about it at the time, but I was like, "What do you mean? What setting?" I mean, I guess you
Yeah.
can take the typical Lovecraft country, Arkham, Innsmouth, Dunwich, and so on, and
20s.
take that
Yeah.
as the setting in the 1920s and that period. But you can set it in New England and in the modern day and have no Arkham and no Innsmouth. So there is no canon. To me, there is no canon setting, because when I write scenarios, I just make the scenario and then I think, where would it be best set, and I just put it wherever, really. And also, there's very little canon, I think. So I think that's the second thing. One is setting, and the second is canon. So I mean, again, if
Yeah.
we go back to Lovecraft, he didn't really write a definitive setting like, say, Tolkien did, or the Star Wars universe or Rivers of London. They all give us much more defined settings that have got
Mhm.
things that you would have in there and things you wouldn't have in there. In Call of Cthulhu, I feel like it's horror films. Anything, you could put anything in there, pretty much literally anything. So I don't feel constrained to make something Lovecraftian necessarily, I guess, is a
Yep. Do you find that maybe new writers that come in kind of expect that Chaosium will want the 1920s, kind of 30s era investigation, or is that becoming more broadly kind of understood?
okay. So I'm speaking for myself as a
Yeah.
personal writer rather than with my Chaosium hat on.
Yeah.
So with Chaosium, we are more orientated towards the 1920s is one of our, core settings. So if you are writing with a mind to become published by Chaosium, for Call of Cthulhu, then writing something for the 1920s is a good place to aim for, or for for one of our core settings like Gaslight, like Down Dark Trails, like a modern day. So it's, if you go outside of those bounds, certainly you can do, but it's more of a step for us to take on something that doesn't fit into one of those, because that's kind of where we tend to focus. And we tend to focus on investigative games in those periods.
Right. And that makes sense. I think a lot of what we've talked about, you'll see more Miskatonic repository titles kind of playing around outside of that, since that's the independent, I guess, quote unquote. I don't know what the term is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the creator content, community content, and it's fantastic. I mean, my scenarios, well, of the three you mentioned, My Little Sister Wants You to Suffer was published in Cthulhu Britannica like 20 years ago. But it was kind of a collection of miscellaneous scenarios. I think all three of them would be, certainly like Dockside Dogs is a kind of a modern day pastiche of taking inspiration from Reservoir Dogs, the film. Full Fathom 5 being a whaling ship scenario. If you're going to put that into a collection of scenarios and publish it as a Chaosium book, it's a hard sell, because people tend to want a bunch of scenarios in a book that are in the same period, or a set of disparate scenarios in one book is kind of a hard sell, perhaps. It's not unique. We do have some, but they tend to have a stronger theme, I guess, is what I'm saying, when you're putting a book together for publication. Whereas the repository is great, because you can go to the repository, and this is the kind of scenario that I'm really talking about. You can go to the repository with literally anything that fits into Call of Cthulhu. You're putting it out, and as Chaosium, we're giving you the license to do that. From a creative point of view, fantastic. You've got free license to kind of create within that. And from a financial point of view, it's great too, because you're getting like 50% of the sale cost. If you were to just put something on drive-through yourself, you would get under your own steam. Obviously not Call of Cthulhu, but if you publish your own game and whatever, you would get 65%, I believe, from drive-through.
Oh, those are quite interesting metrics.
So it's like you're not actually losing. Do you see what I'm saying? You'd get 65 cents in the dollar, whereas publishing under the banner of Call of Cthulhu, which is, I think, probably going to guarantee you more sales.
And you can use the established product and everything.
Exactly. So you've got license to all of the game mechanics, all of that, all the the stuff that's gone before, and the big customer base, and you're getting 50% of it. I mean, that's not you're not going to become a millionaire doing it, but it's it's a good. I think it's a to me it seems like a really good deal.
Yeah. And there's pretty good support. Yeah, there's good support at the conventions we've gone to as well, of getting imprint copies of some of those and just meeting creators through that repository.
Yeah, because going back a couple of years, we didn't have that permission to publish community drive-through content and sell it at conventions. That's a relatively new thing, like 2 or 3 years ago that we started doing that. So that's really nice. And like you said, the community around the Miskatonic repository is fantastic. I would never anticipated this happening. A community that's sort of centered around, started out on, I think, maybe like on Facebook, and there's a Discord, I think, and also you see it when you go to conventions. You see it in person, and there are so many people willing to give their time and support and help and advice and experience to support new writers. It's great.
Yeah, it really is. But back to writing a scenario and what defines it, right? It really seems like you just write what you like, and it has these 3 dials that you did talk about.
Yeah, I don't know that I even think about the dials. It's more of a, it's like art criticism is something that comes after the artist has done their work, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So you just I'm not
putting myself forward as an artist. I'm just saying the criticism comes afterwards and the analysis comes afterwards. When you're creating something, I think you just kind of do it.
A creator, yes.
Yeah. And I think that thing of writing what you enjoy and what excites you and looking for the little golden nuggets in your work, and learning how to develop those and focus on those and bring out the best and give it structure and so on is, that's what you kind of need to focus on when you're writing your scenario.
So when you write something, you've got an idea that hooks you, you write it up. Do you then go back and see, does this fit into Call of Cthulhu? Does it fit into maybe like a Rivers of
Right.
London? I think is we'll probably end up talking a little bit more about that later. Of do you kind of push it then towards the system, or do you have the system
already in mind?
Yeah, already in mind.
I think the kind of things that I tend to writing, I've got Call of Cthulhu in mind when I'm writing it, and that just kind of guides me. That's just, I mean, I guess I love the game. I love the whole, I was going to say setting, but I don't want to say that. But I love the game and the whole feel of it. And that's just kind of where I go to, really. So, but some of my inspirations are more like, Philip K. Dick and the Twilight Zone.
Sure.
Those kind of strange ideas, but they're almost, some of that is almost horror. It's sort of kind of loss of personality, loss of self, and confusion over what's real and what isn't. So there's a lot of aspects of that I think you can play on and bring, they very much shoulder to shoulder with horror. So I don't start off writing a scenario and think what system it's going to be. I would always start off knowing that I'm writing for the system, but at times I have written scenarios and then thought it doesn't have enough mythos in it. So I'm going to say it was, I don't know, some monsters that did it. Just kind of, because it isn't necessarily that important to me what I don't know how to put it, but the rationale behind it, there needs to be a rationale, but it's not necessarily a mythos one, but I can just add a little bit of that to make it, to tie it in more, I guess.
Well, the primary focus is, would you say the players are to have fun?
Yes. Well, the primary focus, I would say, is to excite people's imagination.
All right. That's great.
Yeah.
So here's another point. So when we were scheduling this interview, you suggested the topics of discussing the limits of Call of Cthulhu scenarios, and that's a very interesting topic considering that you're one of the writers of Call of Cthulhu itself. So at what point is it pushed to the limit, or when does it stop becoming Call of Cthulhu?
I think it's a question of tone. There's not really a single tone, but if it becomes, I think if it just becomes out and out comedy, for me, that kind of stops being Call of Cthulhu. I think you can have a comedy if you kind of flip it sometimes, so because comedy and horror kind of go arm in arm very often. When does it stop being Call of Cthulhu? I think it needs to have some horror elements somewhere in it, and they may be more a sense of wonder than a sense of horror, because often, going back to Lovecraft again, is often played more on or as much of a sense of wonder, and by that I mean kind of like, the realization that goes on in the Mountains of Madness about the sort of deep time and these ancient races and
the penny drop moment.
And it's not like, oh, there's just a monster that wants to eat me. It's never just that. Or it's never just like, oh, some gory scene with some guy with an axe. There's always like a sense of, I guess, that cosmic horror thing as well. Of going, there's horror, but there's like, oh, wow, as well.
Yeah, like a revelation sort of thing, where they go, oh, not only did we find the city, but it's so old that we realize humanity's basically the fleas on the earth after it's been abandoned.
Yeah, and you just get this sense of, the vista opening up before you. Yeah, and it's just, revelation is a good word for it, I think. So yeah.
Right.
So trying to, I think, incorporating some of that. I always try and get some of that in there.
And that makes sense, just without spoilers, thinking through those kind of the three scenarios that we talked about. They all have a big revelation in them, a moment where
Yes.
they go, "Oh, everything I thought I knew is twisted in a way."
Yeah, so we called it the old fuck moment because at some point in the scenario, everybody looks at each other and, oh, fuck. You know,
Yeah.
we're in above our heads. Or,
Yes.
you know, this isn't what I thought it was. You know, we've been doing this thing and it's not what we thought. Or, you know,
Mhm.
whatever it is, but having that moment, and that's what in a lot of great horror films we see, you know, there's
Yeah.
that twist or that pulling the rug out from under your feet. And it's like that is the moment you want, I think, in a good Call of Cthulhu
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah, I think keepers live for that moment in
Yeah.
every game.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And whether it's a cliffhanger or it's the end. Yeah.
That's what I aim for. Yeah, very
Mhm.
much.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice? One of the things I've heard about movies is you can tell they're cleverly written by how well they hide the callbacks that will come back later at the start of the movie.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for writers coming in that want to have that revelation to, I guess, not reveal itself too early?
Conversely, don't disguise it too much either.
Hmm.
It's very easy to have a twist that hasn't been signaled at all. If I give you no indication that this guy is actually a monster in disguise,
Mhm.
when it's revealed that he's a monster in disguise, you're just like, oh, I never saw that coming. But it's not really
Yeah.
a twist. You need
Yeah.
to have had things laid down. You know, he was eating something weird. He was,
Leaving a slime trail. Yeah.
yeah, you know,
You want your players to feel smart.
yeah, you want to, all those good movies with a twist. When you watch the film again, you go, bloody
Yeah.
hell, you know, like
Yep.
Get Out, right? I don't know if you've seen the movie Get
Yes.
Out.
Yep.
Like when you watch that again, every line almost is indicating what's going to happen. But when you see it first time, they don't mean that to you. You kind of pick up
Yeah.
on it a little bit, but it's so laden with those. When you watch it again, it's a pleasure because you see all those
Oh,
things.
that's what it means.
Yeah, exactly. I think doing twists is difficult.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's a difficult thing to write. I think you almost have to play them such openly enough that sometimes they're not going to work. Sometimes people are going to pick up on it, and that's fine.
Yeah. Well, they get to feel smart. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Right? If they
Yeah,
don't pick up
yeah.
on it, they get the twist. If they do, then they feel good.
If you want to skip a minute or two to not spoil My Little Sister, this is the moment. Skip 2 or 3 minutes ahead.
I mean, the revelation in My Little Sister, my science fiction game, the fact that it's not actually a spaceship.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fellow GM running it when I was back in Cult of Keepers, and he said, you know, they punched through the wall, and it was obviously just like plasterboard, drywall lining.
Yeah.
But still, the players carried on as if it was a spaceship. They didn't want to. Somehow, it's almost like they didn't want themselves to realize it. You know, it was like
yes.
he just had a monster run out, and they just got back into the game and just kind of forgot about it. So I think you can. It was a remarkable how much you can push that, and how many. What seemed to the. So I think the thing is, when you're keeper, it's important to know that the whole world is coming out of your mouth. You know, everything the players perceive, apart from like maps and handouts and so on, everything else is through what you say, your words. And you feel like you're making it so obvious, I think, as keeper, you know.
Yeah.
But you're not often.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to the listener, they're confused. They don't know what's going on. Well, they know what's going on, but they don't know the secrets. So it's remarkable how much you can say.
Absolutely. One of my favorite lines in the module is the alien feels cold and rubbery because it is cold and it is made of rubber.
I know, it's fun, right?
It's so good.
And they start cutting into it, and it's like, oh, it's all like plasticky, and they're like, oh, yeah, it's weird. So I just love playing with that sort of those sort of
that's
ideas.
really great.
Yeah.
And some players are going to get it, and they're going to go, oh, this is they whatever the thing is, they kind of see through it. And like we said, I think that's fine.
Mhm.
But when I'm watching those kind of films with a twist, I never want to know what the twist is, and I'm annoyed even if somebody tells me there's a twist, because then I'll be looking for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm probably better at spotting them than I used to be, but I don't really want to spot them.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on the roller coaster and know that I'm not going to die,
Yeah.
Maybe as a writer, you've just trained your pattern recognition to see like plot points and and potential twists.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
But
a little
that
bit, but I
yeah.
try not to. I never watch like behind the scenes documentaries or anything like that, because I
Yeah.
just I hate knowing how the trick is done.
Oh, you like that
Yeah.
magic. Remain magic.
Yeah. So if somebody's doing like magic tricks,
Yep.
I don't want to know how it's done, because it's always very mundane. It's always,
Yeah.
and then when you see it again, you just see it and you're like, yeah, so what? You can admire the person's craft. Equally, so people sort of say, oh, how do you write a scenario? And I think I've heard authors talk about how do you write a novel. And I think it reflects on writing scenarios as well a little bit, is you don't, some clever author, not me, said you don't learn how to write novels, you just learn how to write the novel you're writing now, because each one is different. And I guess that's not wholly true. You do learn a craft of writing, you do learn a craft of writing scenarios, but each one should be different. I think if you discovered a secret formula, then the best thing to do would probably be to burn it, really. You don't want to be formulaic.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So it seems so far that we're talking about those three dials. It doesn't necessarily have to be Lovecraftian for it to be a Call of Cthulhu scenario. To add to that, the mechanics and rule set. I don't think it even has to be the mechanic and rule sets to have the energy of a Call of Cthulhu scenario.
The rule set is designed to kind of complement that kind of game.
Right.
So like pushing a roll is very much kind of came from escalating the sense of trepidation, the sense of nervousness of doing something. And I felt like that was working well in the play tests when I said to my players, like, I think they were searching through a forest and they were tracking some like ghoulish thing. And they said, they failed the roll. They failed the track roll, as they always do. And they said, oh, can we push it? And I said, what are you doing? They said, well, we're getting down on hands and knees and like looking through the ground. And then they said, oh, what might the consequences be? And I was like, well, if you're down on your hands and knees, maybe there's going to be something up in the trees that's going to fall on you. And they were like, oh, maybe we're not going to push the roll. Maybe we won't do that. And I thought, brilliant. If that's making you feel so frightened that you're not going to do that thing, that's kind of creating the tension I want. So I was like, that's cool. It's supposed to be a horror game, and it's very hard to make people, I don't think we genuinely scare people. But we do get that feeling of, I don't know how to put it, nervousness about doing something.
Tension.
You're gonna,
Right.
Tension is a good word for it. Yeah, you do get that sense of tension, which I think is good. And people want to, generally players want to buy into that because that's what they've signed up for, right?
All right. So the mechanics, they complement it being a Call of Cthulhu
I think
scenario,
so.
right?
Yeah.
To remove the mechanics, though, does that remove it from being a Call of Cthulhu scenario?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because then what you've got is a horror story, or I don't know. Does it stop it being a Call of Cthulhu scenario? I think it does, because it's like a role playing game.
Yeah, you're removing the playing part.
Yeah, you're removing the game.
Yeah.
And you can have fun sitting around with your friends telling a spooky story. People have done that for hundreds of years, right? Sat around a fire, around the fireplace, and told spooky stories, and probably joined in a little bit as well, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's great. And
Yes.
people will say, oh, we had a fantastic game of Call of Cthulhu the other evening, didn't roll the dice once. And I'm
Yep.
like, well, I'm pleased for you that you had fun. Were you playing Call of Cthulhu? I'm not going to tell you were doing it wrong. But in the years gone by, I've done that myself. But usually because it means that you're not doing combat. But I think
Yeah.
we have aimed to sort of use to make the mechanics very much to complement and to build the fiction to help
Mhm.
you as keeper to kind of to develop that sense of tension and story.
Yeah, the having the dice adds that element of surprise too. I mean,
Mm,
you can always throw to someone else and they can come up with something, but having to justify well, why did my search roll fail when we're following this into the
yeah.
forest? Having to come up with that is it makes each run unique.
Yes, and I watched well, not watched because we didn't watch things back then. But when I was working on seventh edition with Mike Mason, when I was working on the rules, I would listen to quite a lot of actual plays.
Hmm.
And back in like 2012, 2013, around then, there weren't that many. There was like Skype of Cthulhu and so on. There was a handful, I think. But I would listen to them and I would observe, games that I was in as well. But I would listen to them and I'd listen to the reactions they had to the dice rolls and
Uh,
how that affected the game and how it affected their reactions and so on. And I think there's a lot to be said for we don't want to roll dice too much, but I think you don't
mhm.
want to roll it too little. Different groups they're going to vary on that scale of how much they use dice because there's no like hard and fast rule as to how often you should roll. That's the
Yeah.
hard thing to give guidance on. But
Mm.
yeah,
When you're writing, I mean, part of the die roll bit is how much a scenario can change. How much do you account for kind of the randomness in a scenario where, I mean, for some games like we just talked about the code a bit, won't do any spoilers, but the ending has, I think, like 10 different options of how it could end kind of written out. Yeah, how do you kind of balance that, giving an end point for the GM?
it's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because you're presenting a a scenario, but essentially it's kind of a story with lots of paths in it. Because
Yeah.
if they just do the first scene and then go off and do something totally different, or what is the rest of the scenario for?
Yeah.
So you are presenting, it's almost like a tree diagram of choices, to put it
Yeah.
as kind of crudest way, I suppose. And some of it is almost an illusion of choice, because as
Mhm.
players, you can do anything. But I've told you that there's a missing guy and he was last seen in that creepy old house on the hill.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where do you want to go? Oh, I think we'll go to the creepy old house on the hill.
Yeah.
Okay. As a player, we just buy into that, right? Because we
Yeah.
kind of know that that's part of the deal.
You're here for the horror game.
Yeah. So when it comes to writing choices, I think it's important that what the players do is significant. It's meaningful because otherwise
Right.
you're just along for the ride. And when it comes to endings, yeah, I think definitely sometimes it's like, okay, there's the cult and they're going to perform some ritual and here's how they stop them doing it in the scenario. And it's kind of taken that the players are going to stop them doing it. So I think you need to explore, what if they do it? What if they don't do it? What
Mhm.
if, I don't know, various combinations of outcomes. And one tip, when you're structuring the scenario, when you're writing the scenario, kind of present the core thread through it, the most likely path
Okay.
that the players are going to take, and present that. Because as a reader, I'm going to read that and I'm going to get it. If at the end, if in every section you're giving me multiple things that can happen, then it
Yeah.
becomes very confusing to read. There's all these different permutations every paragraph, and
Mhm.
I've read scenarios like this, and we tend to restructure that when we're editing. if there are like other options, so there's, option A is the main one, but they could go B and C.
Yeah.
Okay, so in every section, you kind of go option A, option A, option A, option A. So it's very clear. But then you can box out, here's option
Okay.
B. Well, if they
Yeah.
didn't do this, if they killed this key NPC who I've got in the final scene,
Yeah.
if they killed him in the introduction when they met him, here's what you can do. So you're giving the key, you're saying, if your players do something totally unexpected, here's some advice on what you can do, or here's what happens if they don't go to that key place. Here's some other ideas of how you might go to it. But I think that's the key thing, is to the structure, is to make it nice and clear, easy to read, because I don't want to have to read it 10 times before I run it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want it to be a mystery for me, the keeper, either.
Yeah.
Good organization skills.
Well, and that gives too a pretty clear, when you read through the path, usually then you kind of see the big scenes in it that are exciting.
Yeah.
And at least when I read through them, I'm like, oh, I gotta make sure that this scene happens in some fashion. It's they find a body crawling with worms. Oh, awesome! Like, this is gonna happen somewhere.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's going to happen somewhere, and maybe they don't go to the location.
Yep.
So you can transpose that and put it somewhere else. Maybe you can reuse those elements.
Just drop a clue or turn a clue into a floating clue.
Yeah,
Just act like
exactly. You can
like
move. You can move things around.
As soon as it comes out of your mouth, it becomes reality. That's what a keeper is now.
Yeah.
I know we've already talked about general writing advice, but just going fully into that, what is your favorite type of scenario to write? I'm already guessing it's the one like with revelation and twists.
I mean, there's elements of commonality, I suppose. There's that sort of, there's some sort of revelation. I won't necessarily know what that is when I'm planning the scenario. Sometimes it's kind of a revelation to me as I'm the best. I guess that there's that element of kind of the fun of creating the scenario for yourself. And sometimes as you're writing, you've got these various things, and an idea will come to you, and it's kind of exciting. And you pat yourself back on the back and sort of think, oh yeah, that's great. But it's kind of a surprise, it's not something that it's almost like you've worked it out yourself.
So you don't have a twist in mind when you start, or
not necessarily, or I guess I start with different inspiration and different ideas. So for Gatsby and the Great Race, which is a sort of multi-table game with multiple groups that kind of overlap, the initial starting point for that was just a friend back in the days when we had the Cult of Keepers, a group of keepers that were running scenarios at various conventions. And one of my friends said, wouldn't it be cool if we could take a player from one game, take them out, and take them to another game? And I thought, that's great. I love that idea. So that was the seed of the whole scenario. Just a contrivance to kind of do that, and that required a lot of banging your head on the table, really, to try and figure out, for me at least, to try and figure out a way that would work consistently. And that became kind of integral to that game.
Oh, so taking a step back, that really seems like a mechanics first kind of inspiration, right? So
for that one,
yeah, and then you put a coat of paint on it that makes it makes the world make sense, or makes the mechanic make sense.
Yeah, you kind of build everything around that,
right?
But I think basically, you've got to find an idea that excites you, and that can be working with different authors. I realized that scenario authors, a lot of them don't do it like I do it. And when you're working on your own and you just write your own games, and you probably read published stuff, but you write your own games, you think everybody does it like you. Why would they do it any differently, right?
Yeah.
But then you were in with a team, and you sort of say, "Oh, let's do another scenario altogether." How are we going to start? And there's like 6 of you, and one lands on, where's it going to be set? Is it going to be set in Arkham? And I'm like, well, I don't really care where it's going to be set. So for me, it's kind of an idea. For somebody else, it's a location. For somebody else, it's like flicking through the Malleus Monstrorum. Which monster are we going to use? Yeah, for
Sure.
somebody else, it's a particular period, or everybody has their kind of different ways of starting and developing scenarios. So you just got to go with the one that appeals to you, the one that seems obvious to you, and just find something in there that excites you, something that sparks your imagination, that gets you, excited about, and then just dig into it and start writing about it, research, and that, all these things you do bounce back into the scenario. So you do research for context, and that will bounce back ideas, because you'll read something about the location. In the 1927, this thing happened in this town, and you go, oh, wow, that could actually fit into my scenario. I haven't thought of that. Or you look at a map for the house, a floor plan. Don't leave that till last. You look at you go into, you do a search for floor plans, and you find a genuine 1920s house, and it's got this weird little cupboard in there. And then you think, oh, what could be? Oh, my God, my guy could be in that cupboard.
Yeah.
And all these things just spark back ideas, and you just got to be on the lookout for them. You start doing don't leave doing we have the dramatis personae, or the section about the non-player characters. And for each one of those, we have like traits, we have role-playing hooks, we have the other thing, description, and a bit of background. And when you write those, you kind of think, well, why is this person involved in the scenario? Why would they be there? Why are they letting this happen? Or you write even the stats for them, and you think, well, this guy's like got a tome, so that means he's got spells, right? So I'll pick a couple of spells. Well, what wouldn't he have used those? What would he do with them? How does that affect the people around him if he knows dominate? The spell dominate. That's going to have a big impact. So all these things like feed back in, and you just got to be on the lookout for them, and you just kind of build them in. It's like having a big Lego set, I guess. All these pieces you put together, and you just kind of constantly building and putting it together, with the idea of it being a horror scenario of some kind.
Great.
Yeah. When do you add the visual art side of it? Because a lot of the Call of Cthulhu published things have really good character portraits, or you said maps already, or just kind of scene setting images.
Yes. So I'd say all of those things. Okay, so if I address it from the Chaosium side of things, when we're developing and editing a scenario or a campaign, if along the way we get ideas for this scene would be this chapter has got this character in it and this thing happening, we could put a comment in to say it would be great to have a picture of the Shoggoth coming out and eating this person or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there'll be an art director. So that will get passed once the text is pretty much complete. It'll get passed to an art director, and they will go through and look for scenes that would be good to be illustrated, and they will communicate with artists, and so there's a whole back and forth. Which, going back to the repository, obviously it's different, because you're probably not going to have an art director. It's just going to be you, the author, sorting this out. So there's a few things that I think are important to bear in mind here. One is, like I said, maps. Get the maps up front. Don't write about a house, all the rooms, all the descriptions, and then go looking for a map. You are making a life of pain for yourself. Equally, don't think I can draw a house and draw a bunch of boxes for rooms and then say that's a house, because it won't look like a house. It will look like a bunch of boxes that somebody's drawn on a piece of paper. It won't look like a convincing house unless you're an architect or you spend a lot of time looking at houses to buy.
What if the house person was insane, though?
Well, there have been many strange architects, but they tend to build more interesting places.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It's much easier to get the map, and the map will probably be more interesting than one you would make, and it will be much easier to write about if you've got it at the outset. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
So maps equally, for maps of the towns or whatever. Get all the maps, in the development stage of the scenario. For the characters, again, if you were going to write about a woman and she's got, and you describe her as having like ginger, frizzy hair, and glasses and a big overcoat, I don't know, and she walks with a stick. Well, fine, but now go and find a picture of that woman online to give to somebody to make an illustration of. That's quite hard. So before you write your character descriptions, I would urge you to go online, find pictures. Not that you're going to use the pictures directly, but if you're going to have an artist illustrate or make portraits or anything, find the picture that you can just give to them. I want a picture of this person. That's a lot easier. Then you've got that person, and you're writing about that person. You've got the image all the way through, and that's a lot easier than trying to retrofit things. In terms of other art, I mean, for some of my work, I've used like what's it called, Unsplash. Okay. There are like sites where you've got lots of photographs that you can attribute the photographer and just they've put it up there copyright free but most stuff on the internet you know it isn't free to use, right? You can't just use anybody's images, obviously. But there's when you're just putting out something on the repository, you probably don't have a massive budget to pay for art, and you don't want to get in over your head on like a massive debt of art. So it's just trying to strike a balance.
Yeah.
But if you can get, if you can get, like I worked with John Sumrow for Full Fathom 5.
Right.
And great artist. He did the cover for Full Fathom 5.
Yeah.
And he couldn't quite, well, at least so I described the image to him and he really nailed it. I mean, he did it much better than I could have envisaged. But the captain, I was like, I want the captain. He drew the captain, but it wasn't quite how I wanted him. So in the end, I just had to kind of take a photograph of myself in the captain's pose, and then he used that. And now whenever I look at it, I'm like, yes, that's me. I can see that's me. So I think there's a bit of back and forth and direction with artists and communication and so on. And that's a tricky thing. Is it finding someone you can work with and.
That's interesting. It seems like it makes it a lot easier though for the artist if you have that vision board in your head ahead of time that you can send them, 5-6 pictures and be like, mush these together. That's what I was looking at when I came up with them.
Because I think you've got to think of it from your point of view as the author. You've created this fantastic scenario and you're going to send it to the artist who's going to lovingly read it through several times. And no, they're not. They're an artist. Their time is valuable. They don't want to have to read all of your stuff and figure it all out. So you need to direct them. And it's no good them doing it and then sending it to you and you saying, oh, no, that's not really what I thought. Can you make loads of changes? Because then you're just wasting their time or upping how much you're going to have to pay them. So having clear directions and having, images for them to base their work on, source material is so important. Yeah.
And it seems like it goes back to what you talked about as finding that that thing that interests you, that excites you about it. If you're excited by an image of something where you're like, yes, that is exactly it. That seems like the passion kind of keeps being fueled through the process that way.
Yeah. If you're not an artistic, visual artist type person, you may sort of think, well, I don't know. I don't really know what the cover would be. I don't know what I want. But I remember talking to a graphic designer friend, John Ossaway, who designed he did our logos for the Good Friends of Jackson Elias podcast. And he also we did a t-shirt design, Good Friends of Jackson Elias, and it got like kind of a silhouette maybe of Jackson with like a hat on. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, well, what have you got in mind for this t-shirt? And I'm like, well, I don't know, really. It's just, I'm thinking of a circular design with the words around the edge. But he knew that I'd got an idea in mind.
Mhm.
But I mean, I hadn't said it, but he was obviously
Yeah.
used to working with clients and teasing out that information because that's his job. He's a professional graphic artist. So he really like said, "Well, Paul, what have you got? What's the picture that's in your head?" And I was like, "Well, I'm thinking some, Jackson from the side." And he's like, "Yeah," and he kind of teased it out of me. And I kind of knew that idea was there, but I didn't feel confident enough to sort of describe it. I kind of wanted to put it to him, but he
Yeah.
he knew well enough to, to ask me.
Yeah.
So my point is, if you've written the scenario, you probably be confident in your ideas. You might not be able to render those as drawings, or drawings or paintings or anything, but you've probably got some kind of idea in your head,
Yeah.
and that idea that excites you. Talk about that and think about that and think about how that could be an image, and the artist will do the work. They'll make it into a picture.
No, that's really great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of in that tangent off of that, how do you keep that excitement slash are there any major lessons you'd like to impart for writing longer campaigns like Order of the Stone or Two-Headed Serpent? Those are both more expansive than a single scenario.
Yeah, that's a lot harder, I think, because as we discussed with a one shot, when I say one shot, could be a few sessions, right?
Yeah.
Could be multiple sessions, but it's kind of one story, like one movie, if you like.
Hmm.
And we sort of said that you might get that opening scene, and then they could go in various different ways, and there's various different endings. But there's probably one ending that most people get to, but there's a choice of
Yeah.
different endings. Well, if they go to a different ending, and then you've got another chapter, well, now they're starting in a different place on chapter 2 to what you anticipate. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
when you're just doing one film, one story, one scenario, it's kind of that's a lot easier to handle. It's kind of contained.
Hmm.
When you're doing chapter 2 of a campaign, where did they finish on chapter 1?
Right.
There's a lot more. It's a lot harder to handle. So those two you mentioned, Order of the Stone. So Jared Twing wrote Order of the Stone.
Hmm.
I did like some editing and development on it, and so did Lynn Hardy. So when I saw the original manuscript from Jared, I thought, this is great. Yeah, it's got a good structure, and there's lots of good things in it. There's lots here that we can work with, and it was just down to me and Lynn to just to well, partly to like fit it to our mold, to
Yeah.
make it fit in the line of Call of Cthulhu books from Chaosium. But that was good source material. So, well, not good source material, a good campaign
Yeah.
that Jared had already written. Two-Headed Serpent, that's very different because coming into that with my co-authors Matthew Sanderson and
Mhm.
Scott Dorward, we were starting from a blank page. So we wrote that from
Mm.
scratch. That's
And
that's a
it's a
very
pulp game
different,
too.
and it's pulp. Yeah,
Right.
that was the first pulp. I don't know if it was the first pulp scenario, but it's the first pulp campaign, certainly.
Mhm. I do have a question here.
Oh, go ahead.
Just on pulp, and it's like, how do you
Mm.
make pulp scary when you have, and also have big pulpy moments when you have your PCs as larger than life heroes?
Mm. How do you make it scary? There's still a lot of the same tropes. There's
Mhm.
still sanity. There's still big monsters. And I guess the horror is bigger. You've kind of
Oh, larger scale.
Oh.
larger scale, but sometimes sometimes there's going to be things that, you can't punch them. It's like,
Yeah.
there's going to be, I guess horror usually comes back to a personal scale rather than a big scale. So it's usually a personal scale. And it's those kind of quieter moments of, I think it's probably harder to do
Right.
because you're pulp heroes and you can face off against most things. So I
Mhm.
think of those three dials that I talked about earlier, obviously pulp turns up the adventure dial. It's
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
much about like action scenes, like what do we call it? Like like big key scenes. Yeah, I think there are things you can do to bring in the horror, but it's often probably more about bringing in the horror tropes.
So kind of a different source of horror movies. Like if you're talking inspiration, right? It might be more The Mummy
Yeah, I think so.
with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz
Yeah.
than an older movie.
That's a good way to put
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely a different kind of feel. Where were we before that? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Campaigns.
campaign advice.
Campaigns.
Yeah.
Writing Two-Headed Serpent. So we started with a kind of blank slate. We had an idea for a bunch of different locations, kind of an overarching theme, who the baddies were. And then we kind of developed from there. And like I started off with the first chapter. I wrote the Bolivia chapter. And that was kind of very much a
Okay.
mashup of like Indiana Jones and Conan the Barbarian, really, with the snake
Yeah.
cult.
Yeah.
And, set in the jungles of Bolivia. And it was just, it was great fun working on that and then sort of immersing ourselves in pulp and seeing, because at the same time, Mike was developing the rules for Pulp Cthulhu. So that was all sort of happening hand in hand. So we were kind of play testing the pulp rules as we were working on Two-Headed Serpent, the campaign. Like I said about those box outs for like, well, if they kill this character in chapter 1, because we'd get to chapter, I don't know, 5 or something, and Matt would be like, oh, I
Right.
want this key NPC, they're gonna do this thing in chapter 5. And I'm like, well, what if that key NPC got killed? Because we don't want to, what I don't want to see is in chapter 1, the big bad has a big fight with the player characters, and then some text saying, no matter what the player characters do,
Right.
the big bad pulls up his cloak, jumps into the air, and flies away. I don't want that.
Ooh. Ooh.
Yeah,
Book bomb.
exactly. If he can do it, great. But if they can catch, whoever it is, and then if they decide to kill them, or they decide to, I don't know, whatever it is the players decide to do, I don't want to like stop them doing it. So we just needed kind of guidelines to the keeper to sort of say, to how to handle that. So we put a lot of that in there. We had to move it from chapter to chapter. People could do chapters in different order, but there was, as with Master and Archetype, there are more or less kind of standard paths that people will take through it. But obviously, they, different groups can take different routes through those. But a campaign is a lot more to take on. It was great because myself, Matt, and Scott all live, at the time, all lived within about half an hour's drive of each other, and we would meet up pretty much every week, and we'd all be play testing the chapters sequentially. I think probably not concurrently, but we'd give each other feedback, and we'd pick up on each other's ideas. Something would happen in a later chapter, and we'd retrofit something back into an earlier chapter. So it was a very organic and kind of sharing of ideas. Whereas, if you take an approach where you just give chapter 2 to somebody and tell them the characters need to enter at point A and exit at point B, I think it really needs that interaction to make a really good campaign if you've got multiple authors.
Yeah, that's interesting to have it play testing during the running or the writing of it all. Kind of
I mean, I wouldn't
that.
necessarily advocate like play testing before you've written something. I would write it and then play test it, but we were writing chapters and play testing them.
So it really seems like when you have co-authors, you're really climbing this giant mountain together. But if you're just a singular author who's trying to write a campaign, it just seems like there's just a whole lot of work here. But then again, you do have 100% of that creative vision.
Yes.
Have you attempted to write a campaign by yourself?
I was going to say no, I haven't.
Yeah.
No, I mean, very much my thing has been for my own like writing has been one shot convention scenarios.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I kind of learned my scenario writing, really.
Craft.
Yeah. And then it always amazes me that, like some of the scenarios that myself and my friends have written that we would run in 4 hours, some people will take and they'll run them over like 6-7 sessions. And I'm like, great. That's not, that's no slight on them. It's just different style and different players. But when you're in a convention, you're very much like, okay, looking at the clock, I've got 4 hours. Well, we're not going to cram it in, but there's a kind of a there's an energy, there's a intensity that you get because of that time constraint. And you never get, well, it's not you're never going to see these people again, but possibly. And you probably you may never have met them before. So there's a real sort of energy of excitement and intensity in that experience, and everybody's kind of trying to bring their best game as well.
It's beautiful too when multiple people are running your scenario, right? Because your scenario run is going to be different than my scenario run, even though we're running the same scenario. That really reminds me of the quote, like, a man cannot step into the same river twice because it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Because you're going to have different players, you're going to have different GMs. And speaking of scenarios, do you have any favorites?
Oh, well,
however you want to answer this question.
Yeah. I mean, I answered this question at Necronomicon a few years ago. We had a panel of at Necronomicon, and we were talking about favorite scenarios. And it was remarkable how many of the panelists answered with the same scenario. And that scenario then went on, Mike picked up on that, and Mike Mason, and that scenario ended up in the starter box because it was the paper chase.
Ooh, okay.
And Paper Chase is the first scenario I played. It's the first Call of Cthulhu scenario I played. And I just ran it for one friend. And so when you play it in the starter box, it's it's designed to be run for one friend. And it is, it kind of turns up that dial to me of a kind of a sense of wonder. It's kind of a bit of horror, but it's kind of sense of wonder as well, about I won't say what, but and it's kind of quite low key as well. But it's great,
It kind of gets people into the genre a little bit.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, it hooked me. So that's a great one. And that's in the starter box set. Equally, I would say one in the core rulebook is great. And I'm not sure how many people play it. I know quite a lot of people have played it, but if you play Call of Cthulhu, you've probably got the Keeper rulebook, right? So you've got Crimson Letters by Alan Bly. And that's such a great scenario. I don't hear as much love for it as I'd like to, because I think it's such a great scenario. And the great thing that Alan did with that is you've got this this mystery, and the keeper decides who the bad guy is. The keeper decides at the outset who did it. So you could play it again, I guess, if you could potentially play it multiple times. But for the keeper, if you're going to run that scenario multiple times, and this speaks to something you just said, Alex, about your different keepers are going to run the game differently. I think as keeper, when you run the same scenario multiple times, if you run it the same way, if you run a scenario and it goes really well, and certain things happen, when you run it the next time, I think there's a big draw for you to try and make those same things happen, because we all enjoyed it so much when this thing happened, but it kind of happened organically in that first session.
Yeah, and you want it to happen organically.
Yeah, but then when you run it for the next group, if you force that thing to happen, it's not happening organically, and it just doesn't. It just feels contrived.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that scene in Groundhog Day, where he's trying to make the love interest fall in love with him, and he's like trying to repeat the same thing that got him to that point, and it's just inauthentic.
Yes,
and she picks up on it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big inspiration to be Groundhog Day for Gatsby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you've got to like react to what the players do.
Mm-hmm.
Go with what the players are doing, take their lead. And so the first group, they play it in a certain way. The second group, they're a different bunch of people. You give them the opening scene, whatever
Make
that
it
is,
their
and
game.
you react to what they're doing. And you can, you as keeper, you can steer events a little bit, but you try to avoid shoehorning things in and forcing things to happen that don't feel authentic.
Mm-hmm.
That second game is going to be great because you've got a different bunch of players and they're going to do interesting things, but it's going to be different to the first group. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the most fun things about the game, though, is that surprise too, is when you play it with new people and then following a different path along and getting that the excitement of like, oh, I never expected you to absolutely murder the secret cultist. Step one, like, how does that change the scenario from here on? Like,
Yeah.
how do I have to adjust
Yeah,
it
think of it as
to?
a challenge.
Yeah,
And you just said there, Nathan, about new players. I mean, I think there are some games where having new players is, there's a lot to sort of teach them. They need to learn mechanics and they need to learn a lot of stuff to get their head around
yeah,
how the setting works, how the game works. One of the great things I like about Call of Cthulhu is if I go to a convention, I got a bunch of players and I say, who's played Call of Cthulhu before? And there's new players who've never played it before. Great.
Mhm.
Because usually often it's like the game is kind of set in what's ostensibly the real world. Maybe it's historic or maybe
Yeah,
it's modern day. So it's very easy for people to get into the setting, into the scenario, because you just sort of say, oh, you're just a regular person and this is your character sheet. And the skills, I mean, there are some complexities to the rules, but they're fairly easy to grasp and you can
yeah,
explain them as you go along. But you know, new players don't have that expectation of what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be
yeah.
doing, that comes with some, more experienced players. And it's all new to them. So it's a real it's great playing with new players. I love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Corrupt them.
Well, and new players are always going to do something wild where you're like, okay, all right, great.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you burnt down the house. I guess I didn't expect that. So I want to talk a little bit about one of the newer projects that you've worked on with Rivers of London.
Hmm.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about what separates Rivers of London from Call of Cthulhu? Is it the kind of the tone of the mythos versus I don't know that they'd call it the mythos in Rivers of London, the
No.
fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah, the what would you call them? Like the background elements,
Right.
so they're two very different things. I mean, there's quite a bit of commonality. I
Mhm.
guess if Rivers of London role playing game didn't exist, maybe you could run it with Call of Cthulhu, but it's not a horror game.
Hmm.
Ah,
Rivers of London isn't horror.
But it might have horror elements.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right. It might have horror elements.
interesting.
Indeed, in the first book, something really graphically horrible and disturbing
Hmm.
happens. Something that I probably wouldn't put into a scenario, not a published
Yeah.
one. And so there are definite, horrible things that happen in there, but it's not mythos. It's
Yeah.
not horror. It's not a horror game. It's urban fantasy. It's a very different feel, a very different tone. It's definitely investigative. I mean, it's a police procedural with
Yeah.
magic, so it lends itself to the same sort of structure of gameplay of you getting into an investigation, something's happened, there's a mystery, there's clues to follow, there's definite like list line of clues to follow, NPCs, locations, revelations, and mysteries, and so on. I think if you're used to playing Call of Cthulhu,
Yeah.
then if you've I think when we were working on the Rivers of London game, we knew that because gamers are gamers, you're going to have
Hmm.
the GM is probably going to have read some of the Rivers of London books.
Yes.
Maybe one of their players has. Probably several of their players has never read any Rivers of London. Just because that's life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's how gamers are. So we tried to make it as accessible as we could. It's the mechanics are similar to Call of Cthulhu. So if you've played Call of Cthulhu, it's going to be pretty familiar, but there are
Hmm.
significant differences at the same time. Writing for it, I found it interesting writing for or not editing a scenario at least. Jimmy's Last Dance. I've worked on that by Adam Gauntlet, and it was interesting because there were some things in it that I kind of wanted to add a little thing in.
Yeah.
And if it had been Call of Cthulhu, I would have just thrown this like MacGuffin in. Because you can put anything in Call of
Yep.
Cthulhu, right? Any sort of supernatural thing. Yeah, if you want to have a ghost, if you want to have a zombie, if you want to have a machine that controls ghosts, if you want to have whatever it is you want to have, you can have that in Call of Cthulhu because there's no
Right.
restrictions really. Whereas in Rivers of London, it's got to fit the Rivers of London setting. And Ben Aronovich has created a world there that's got a continuity, and it so in terms of ghosts, it tells you what ghosts are and what they're not.
Yeah.
So when you're writing a scenario, you've kind of got to adhere to that. You've got to follow those rules.
Yeah,
you
that
can't
makes
just put
sense.
anything in. So that really struck me as a difference when I was looking at those a Rivers of London scenario or a Call of Cthulhu one. And that's great because it is Rivers of London. It's supposed to adhere to that
Right.
canon.
Right.
And I
Yeah, it would
think
feel kind of
that's
cheap if you kind of were like, oh, this is a weird exception. It wouldn't
exactly.
feel like the books or anything else from it. It would just kind of feel like that inauthentic feeling you've
Yeah.
been talking about.
And I think if you were writing for, the Lord of the Rings game or Star Wars, to take two well-known examples, there are things you could put in those, but there are a lot of things you couldn't put in those because they wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that to me feels different with Call of Cthulhu. It doesn't feel, it's not as constrained somehow.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think the BRP design challenge that happened a few months back at this point kind of showed off different ways to use that core system. I think the winners were pretty diverse of like there's a kaiju thing in there. There's like a more I think like almost a romance sort of aspect. I guess do you have any advice for when you're really changing, you're getting away from the three dials. Do you have any advice for modifying the actual system itself to supplement your idea?
So like molding it to a different setting, to a different
Yeah.
game. Yeah, I think you've really got to think, well, what's key to the game? So for Rivers of London, there's no sanity.
Yeah.
Because it's not about that. It's not about the erosion of sanity and man's sort of facing, or humanity sort of facing the horrors of the universe. It's not about that. So we took that out.
Interesting.
So you can add bits in, take bits out, but it's about sort of thinking what's important, because if you put what you put on the character sheet and what you put in there, people are going to try and use, right? And that's going to affect how the game feels. And
yeah. Yeah, no, I like that of if they look down at the sheet, because that's what a lot of especially new players are going to do. They're going to look at the sheet and go, what can I do?
Right.
Yeah, if you have a sanity thing there, they're going to go, I got to go insane, or I got to spend my luck. I need to use my electronic repair, whatever the big number is under.
That Call of Cthulhu character sheet has a whole bunch of skills on there, and it's quite an array of skills. Whereas if it was just like, I don't know, 5 skills, you'd be looking at them thinking, which one of these 5 skills do I need to use?
Yeah.
But when there's like 30 skills, it's almost like, well, it could be any one of these or maybe something else. Right. So essentially, you just say what you're doing, and the keeper will say, okay, well, that sounds like electrical repair or whatever it is.
You're not trying to like shoehorn a specific skill into the narrative.
Yeah. I mean, actually, really, in fact, in Rivers of London, we did try and cut down, or we did cut down the number of skills to make it a more kind of tailored game.
Streamlined.
So,
interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds good. Well, I think we're coming up on time here. So I'd like to ask you one question, and that is there anything we missed that you'd like to talk about that's very important for our listeners to hear? Or any advice?
I think we've probably covered whatever advice I've got that I can offer.
We juiced you.
Just if you want to write a scenario, a lot of people say they want to write something. You know how you do that? You write it.
Do it.
Thinking about writing it, wanting to write it. Nobody ever achieved anything with that. You just got to sit down and write it. You want to sit down and sign books. Well, you're not going to do that unless you've written a book. So, yeah, just get into it, and maybe you do one and you find that That's all you do. You just wrote
Mhm.
one, or maybe you find you don't really enjoy it. Well, that's fine. You don't have to write a scenario. Just enjoy playing the game and playing games with your friends. But you're in the best time for if you want to
Yeah.
go down that avenue. You are in the best time because never before, I think, has it been so accessible to you to be able to
Yeah.
have a supportive community, to have the facility to write something and put it out so easily. You don't need to write to Chaos Sim to get a license or anything. You can just put it out. So it's all there waiting for you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
I feel like you definitely addressed me personally, so you heard it here first. I'm gonna write a scenario and
Hey.
publish
Okay.
it.
All
Good.
right.
Let's wrap this up. So, we hope these insidious whispers have inspired you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to things we discussed on this episode, like actual plays, any RPG resources that we can share, and an invite to our lab's Discord to discuss more reanimations and consultations. We also post these episodes and resources to our Patreon that's free to follow, or if you'd like, you can make a charitable donation to help us keep the ominously flickering lights on at the H. West Memorial Mortuary and Laboratory. Paul, did you have anything to add? Where can we find you, and is there anything you're working on?
Yep. So I have a podcast with Mike Mason called Eldritch Stories, which is short fiction. So far, we got season 1 out, and season 2 should be coming out soon. We've recorded it. I've just got to edit it and put it out. So that can be found at eldritchstories.com. I've got my blog at paulfricker.com, which I write kind of infrequently, but there's a few articles up there. And, look out for new books coming from Chaosium.
Very nice. So, until next time, thanks for listening to RPG Reanimators, where your games can die.
Or live.
On the table.
I don't know. You're missing out on those millions of dollars you're going to get by writing RPG scenarios. So I don't know.
Well, you are. Yeah.